Welcome to the Stress Free Dentist Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Block. As always, I want to inspire, entertain, and educate you on the best tools and technologies out there. My goal is to help make your practice and career more profitable, efficient, and most importantly, more enjoyable. And check out all of my nonfiction and children's books on Amazon, and check out the stressfreedentist.com for any upcoming events. And if you're feeling you're a dental professional that's burnt out, or you just feel stuck or want to get to that next level, visit the International Academy of Dental Life Coaches or www.iadlc.com, and we'll get you matched up with a life coach that understands dentistry. I also wanted to thank our amazing sponsor, Equa Marketing. They have helped me and my practice over the years to improve with SEO and website performance. And to find out how you can make your practice dominate in your area, go to www.equa.com/MSMSFD to book your complimentary meeting. Again, that's www.ekwa.com/MSMSFD. All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode. And today we are joined by Sandy Pardue. How you doing today, Sandy?
I am great. I am doing really well and excited to be here today.
Awesome. I've been wanting to chat with you for a while. I hear your podcasts and I see you on Dental Town and all over the place. And this is the Stress Free Dentist podcast. And I really feel like you can reduce a lot of stress when you have good business systems in place and your practice is running more efficiently. So I think this is going to be a great episode. Sandy, first, just tell me, how did you first get involved with helping dental offices and helping dentists?
Well, it's been a while. So when I think back, I was I got a job that I thought was just going to be temporary. I thought, oh yeah, I'm going to have another baby. So I started working for a dentist here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I'd heard a lot about him. He had an office. This is like in the 80s, the late 80s. And he was doing 1.3 million. Okay. Like that was unusual for a solo doctor with no marketing, no insurances. And he had a reputation around town to being like super organized. That was his thing. And I thought, well, if I'm going to go to work for a while, I want to work for somebody like that. I didn't want to work in a small practice. And so I applied for the job. Now, this is in the 80s when the economy was terrible. And they said like 60 something people applied for the job, and I got the job. So I was his office manager. And this is pre-dental software. So yes, it took more people to do 1.3 million than it does today. When he retired about 10 years ago, he was doing 2.8 million solo, no marketing, two insurances that he accepted, and 14 team members. So he definitely was able to cut back because of technology. Okay, that just makes sense. But that's where I learned so much. He was an amazing leader, and his wife came to me like in 1993 and she said, look, I think you should be a consultant. I had done a few little workshops on accounts receivable and scheduling and I was like, what? I just couldn't even imagine that. And I literally cried every day for a year because I did not want to leave that job. I loved my job. And she eventually pulled me out of there and put me in one of her buildings down the street. And that's how I started. I mean, that was like, and I had clients there from everywhere. Japan, a lady came twice from Japan, and just word of mouth. This is before the internet. And so then about 2002, Dental Town came about, and somebody from Dental Town called me and told me about Dental Town. And after I got on Dental Town, the rest is history. I mean, the rest is history. I've worked with over 600 dental practices, and I've lectured at all the major meetings. I've published over 60 articles, and I have, like you mentioned, a podcast. I have dental drill bits, and that's it. So I absolutely love helping dental teams, the doctors becoming better leaders, the teams knowing their jobs better. Yeah, so now you know.
Yeah, I still struggle to this day with being a good leader. It's not something I was born with and didn't learn, of course, in dental school about it. I've gotten better, but I still struggle with it every day. Um, you mentioned the dentist that you initially worked for was organized, was a good leader. What are you seeing out there that makes someone a good leader?
Well, first off, what I see is that so many dentists, especially younger dentists, well, I say that pretty much across the board, afraid to communicate with their team. I think communication is number one. And you can't be afraid of your team. And this is why I talk about systems and structure so much in the practices, because practices that are organized, that have the systems and structure, the doctors aren't so scared to lose people. That's the biggest threat. I just spoke to someone last week that is in a situation, and you know what? I will share this because every week or almost every week I hear the same story where I've got someone that I inherited when I bought the practice who's been with the practice for 20, 30 years, or they've been with me that long and they will not change. They are telling me what to do. They will not follow any policy. They are upsetting the rest of the team, but I know nothing about the front. I know nothing about our software, and I'm scared to rock the boat. That I hear all of the time. I could not even tell you how many dozens of times I've heard that same thing over. So you can't be afraid of your team. It starts with knowledge, you knowing what everyone in your practice is doing. You have it documented, you have checklists, you have SOPs, and that way you feel comfortable that you can just slide someone else into that position. You should never fear communicating. So that's number one. And communication's everything if you think about it. So somebody's not following policy, to communicate, to have the protocols so you understand what to do if someone's coming in late or someone will not put their cell phone up. I mean, just look on Dental Town. You'll see a lot of people are afraid to talk to their team. There's a thing going on right now about restroomers, people going into the restroom all during the day and staying 15 and 20 minutes. And we know that when cell phones became popular and people started carrying cell phones, that's when the restroomers were born. So it's a problem. So communicate.
Yeah, I think that personally, I used to wait, and this was I feel like the wrong approach, but I used to wait until our quarterly meeting. I'd have this big prepared speech of all these things I wanted to get done and take care of, and I could just see the eyes glossing over in my team. So what I do now is I treat the morning huddle like a mini meeting, and I communicate with like one or two things that I want to talk about. And it's just, it's quick, it's to the point, and then I'll just keep bringing things up. And it's like, I feel like it's for me the best way to communicate because I have the whole staff there before the day starts. And it's quick. So, I personally feel like for me, the morning huddle is the best time
Yeah.
to communicate for something that's on my mind.
Yeah, I think that works really well, especially if it applies to everyone. One thing that I think people tend to do, well, first off, I like what you said about, like now you're not waiting until there's a staff meeting, okay? Because something could have happened a couple of weeks ago, right? And then having to wait. Now you've got to remember to talk about it. And and then it goes like all the things we're not doing correctly. But one thing that I want to mention is that I see sometimes what doctors will do, or business owners in general, one person's breaking the rule and maybe they have a dozen team members, but they're telling everybody about it. And so the people that aren't guilty are going, gosh, does he think I'm doing that? I hope she doesn't think I was doing that. So that I think if it's somebody that's not following a policy, like for example, one person's coming in late every single day. So you don't want to go into like have everybody there and say, okay, I need you guys to be here on time. And the people that are on time are like, huh? And so that one person, and it is more effective if you handle it with the one person. So I always follow this. Like I notice something. Okay, she was late. Okay, she's a good employee. She does a lot of things right. I'm not going to say anything. She's late again next week. Now I am going to mention it to her. If she's late again, I'm going to write her up and I'm going to send the policy with it. Okay. If she does it again, she could get a formal warning. But the main thing is documenting every one of these engagements that you have with her, mentioning it. I observed it. I wrote her up. You put a copy in her employee file. And then they're more likely to pay attention when you are noticing and saying something. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Now, are you seeing success with this? Or is it like 50-50? Are some employees just that's the way they are? They're going to show up late. After you've had these conversations, you've possibly written them up, you've discussed the policy, send them home with the policy. Are you finding that, with these one-on-ones that you're correcting the poor behavior most
For
of the
the
time?
most part, for the most part.
Yeah.
So 9 out of 10 times, because you confronted it and they know once you write them up and they know hey, I'm not going to get away with this. I better get there. Look, even me, okay, I'm Sandy Pardue. Okay, I was late the first day of that job I mentioned. I was late because I had been home for 5 years with my child, and I forgot that many people got up that early in the morning. The traffic was terrible. So it can happen, right? So my doctor and office manager were like, "Oh, yeah, you need to get here on time." And then I was never late again. So that was a one-time thing. So my point being, when they know you're watching, number one, you're going to do something about it. That's number two. That's more effective. You have a policy of office hours in writing. Okay, that's what you need. Most practices that we start working with have no policy manuals. We call it a standard operation procedure manual that's got like all the office hours, what time you're supposed to clock in. So it states you can arrive at 7. We see our first patient at 8. You can clock in at 7:15 or 7:30, whatever it is in your practice. You want to give them time to set up. But if you don't have that in writing, they could clock in at 6:45, 7, sit there on their cell phone, eat their breakfast. I see it all the time. So you need to name what it is that you want from your team. That's the first step in getting it. And then when they know that there's protocols and systems that are followed, they're more likely to follow them. And every once in a while, you're going to get somebody that's not going to follow the policy. You don't want them on your team anyway. We're moving into a new year, and it's a great time, that first quarter of the year, or any time actually, to do a team inventory. Who are you on your team that you're like looking at them and going, I wish they would call in sick. It's like some doctors actually have those people on their team where you celebrate when they're not there. It's time to replace them, and don't be afraid to replace them if you have a system in place where you're documenting things. But start with that procedure manual, the SOP that has everything, where they should park, what their uniforms, everything that you need them to do, how to call in sick, vacation days, sick days, all your policies. And that is how you get them to do what you need them to do. And they like it. People want to know what's expected of them.
What about the staffing issues that it's harder to find people? Is that a major fear? Is that why poor behavior can be tolerated?
Right now, for the first time, I'm going to say, since COVID, but it's getting better. Okay, I will say that is getting better all over the country. I'm seeing it, and you have to maybe think about this. When you go to hire somebody, you've got to find someone that's working somewhere else. If you think about it, the good people are working. Okay. The good people that you want in your office likely already have a job. So you're going to have to attract them to your practice. That could be in an ad that's written up that's savvy, that gets their attention. I'm not talking about bribing people, but having a culture in your practice that attracts people, where people really want to work for you. Just like I, in the late 80s, heard about Dr. Westerman's practice just in the city, everybody knew who he was and that it was extremely organized and a great place to work that you would actually learn. And people would say, when I leave here, we would actually give an IQ test when people started working there and give it to them on their last day, and that they improved every
Hmm.
time. And so that is, and they didn't mind taking it. People were interested in that. So um, it's like people want to do right. They want to have a good job. They want to enjoy going there. So culture is everything. So brag on that. Don't make your ads about we want you to be like this. We want you to be cheerful. We want you to communicate well, be a good communicator, all the things that these ads say. Instead, we'd like you to join our team. We have this and that, a 4-day work week, great hours, benefit. Why would they want to come to you?
Now, do you recommend approaching people you see out there that look like, at a restaurant or at a store or at a,
I've done
whatever
it.
it is, and they look like
Absolutely.
they're got a great attitude, probably no dental experience. Have you recommended that in the past?
Absolutely. And I've seen it work really, really well. Here's the thing, there's a couple of things I always look at when I'm hiring. And when I'm looking at team members, and I can go into an office or meet a team, like when I'm giving a seminar, I can look out and pretty much tell like who's going to take some things home, who's not, by the way they're sitting. Seriously, if you start noticing body language and walking, if in an interview, we had a long hall. And so I would have my assistant bring that person to a room to fill out a physical application and, do testing and that kind of thing. So I would look to watch them walk. If they were slouching and kind of, like looking off to the side, I mean, I kind of started, and I was always right. And and then when you start talking to them, if they're slow talking, see, that would personally drive me crazy. So you want to get someone who's got their speed of communication is swift. When you ask them a question, they don't have to think about it. They're quick. Those people are going to get more work done versus somebody that's moving slow and well, that is not going to be somebody that's going to do well with presenting treatment plans or communicating on the telephone. And so you have to look at those things. And so if I'm at a restaurant and I see someone, and this has happened, I know we needed somebody to be a runner at the office, and back in the day with charts. Okay, this is like when we had to file charts, pull charts, and I remember we hired Darlene, and I actually met her out at a restaurant. She was perfect for this job, so she didn't need dentistry, but she needed to move swiftly, and that was one. I also I recommended someone that I met at a bank for a local office. And she started working in the office as the financial coordinator. She learned dentistry. She was smart. You see, if you hire smart people, they can learn. And that's the thing is I often recommend the Wonderlic test. Now that's the one that I like. And some people listening might not know about the Wonderlic test, but if you've ever watched football, you see the quarterbacks, and typically the quarterback, they're smart, right? They need to be smart. Well, the NFL uses the Wonderlic test they test all these quarterbacks. And that's the one I use. And I typically like to have for an administrative team member at least a 21. A
Mhm.
24 would even be better. I think Peyton Manning was like a 36. That's like one of the highest scores you can get. But for your front office, if you get an 18 or a 19, they're not going to be quick to learn as somebody that does a 21 to a 24 or higher. So just keep that in mind.
That's interesting. I've heard of other, the disc and some other.
Sure, that's
Um,
personality. And go
yeah.
try to change somebody's personality. That's tough. And
Mhm.
especially people start giving those out when the people already work for them. Now, what are you going to do?
Mhm.
So,
I just want to go back. I can't shake this, but the bathroomers, what do you do in that situation? And we're talking about people that are probably on their phones in the bathroom for like 15, 20 minutes, multiple times a day. And this is not just dentistry. My brother-in-law has a decal, high-end decal company. simpleshapes.com, and I believe he had an issue with an employee doing something similar. How do you deal with that? Because I imagine there's state laws, and what do
Yeah.
you recommend there?
Well, here's the thing. It could be a problem that a health problem with the person. So you need to ask them about it. Okay, just ask them about are you feeling okay? Are you having any issues? And if they say, you know what, I do. I have these issues, and my doctor knows about it. You want to get a note from the doctor. So you want to make sure that you're not that if you will give them access to the restroom that and follow any ADA compliance, right? Um, because if it's a disability, you've got to make sure that you let them have access to the restroom. But here's the thing: they're probably not going to bring you that note.
Hmm.
Okay, so then if they don't bring you the note, then that gives you the leeway to handle it and talk to them about it. So I know one case where she said, "Oh yeah, you know what? I have a problem," and she brought the note, and but eventually after she brought the note, it got better. But if it causes a problem in the practice, that's a whole nother issue, right? So you want to always relate it to the job. So if it's a hardship for the job that this person's in the restroom and you don't have anybody to greet patients or answer the phone, you never make it about the disability. You never make it about the disability. You make it about the hardship on the office. That's very important to remember. You could also contact your local attorney. Different states have different laws, but I know one thing you could do that now I just, this is the opposite of what I just told you. You could announce this at a meeting that
Hmm.
there's a lot of bringing phones in the restroom. Okay. And and they don't bring it up again. So, you guys, if you need to have a few minutes to make a call, a personal call, you need to request it from your supervisor or from me, and you can have that time and just bring it up that one time. But then now they're going to know, hey, I'm going into the restroom bringing my phone. So you have to look, is it a hardship? And if it's a hardship and they don't have a medical problem, you can also write them up if they're off post. No one was there to greet Mrs. Jones. She sat in the reception room for 15 minutes. We didn't know she was there. You make it about that. And then they should get the message because you write them up. It just, I come from the world where everybody had a little basket. We all had a mail basket. And if you did something wrong, you might just get a copy of the policy in your basket or it was written up. I mean, this is like, I know that this is harder when there's just a small team, 3 or 4 people, but but you got to do it. They need to learn. This is we are an organization. We're organized, and this is what we're going to do. And that's the only way sometimes for them to get the message, even if it's taking a policy and saying, please reread this, and you making notations that you actually did talk to them about it. But if you think about it, you see on Facebook and these Facebook groups, you listen on podcasts, you see on Dental Town, all of this, people are complaining about the same things with their team, not being able to control them or get them to follow protocol. And so that's why having a system for managing your team is so important. And that's how you'll get the good people working for you because they won't have a problem with these things because they follow the rules. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that, the small team, sure, it may be a difficult conversation, but that's the best time to start because eventually the goal is that your practice grows and, that's going to add more staff and then it becomes more difficult. So start when you have a smaller staff. Um,
Absolutely.
Now, talk to me about micromanagement versus being too lax with management. Is there a fine balance there between micromanaging, or is it all about having those systems in place that help you avoid having to
Right.
micromanage your team?
Okay. Well, I'll tell you that this is another thing that I hear all the time from team members because I train a lot of teams, and sometimes I hear Sandy, our doctor is a micromanager. And I take that opportunity to explain why they may be interested in what the team members are doing during the day. And I do it in such a way of this is how long they went to school. They likely spent this much money on their education and they don't even have an office yet. And so then they kind of like, oh, wow, really? Is that much? And so the doctor needs to know. So let's set up some systems and accountability for each position where the doctor doesn't have to stand over you or ask. So to me, as a consultant, that's what we work towards. It's like, all right, there's two people up front. One is answering the phone and scheduling. The other is doing insurance and financial. So we know that. So the first thing is we've divided the duties. So now we know who's doing what versus many practices have two or three people sharing all of the responsibilities. So there's zero accountability. Who's the best one? Who's the best one on the phone? Who schedules the most? Who's better at treatment acceptance? Who knows? They don't know. So, and believe me, it's very inefficient to work like that. You ever heard like too many cooks in the kitchen? That's kind of what that is. So one of the first things we do with our clients is we divide the duties. We put like things together, which is the first step to organizing anything in life, like things together. So once we do that, the team have checklists and procedure manuals and statistics. This is the key part that align with what they can control. I was talking to a doctor recently, and he has the hygienist tracking the office collections. And I had to have him repeat it. I was like, okay, how does the hygienist control that? Well, she doesn't. Well, who should have that statistic? That should be your financial coordinator, right? Because that's the person that's making financial arrangements, sending statements, getting the money collected. That should be her statistic. So if the doctor knows that number, the doctor now knows how well that person's doing at their job, and they can compare to previous months or years or so forth. Same with scheduling, broken appointments by provider, the production by provider, and watching like units of time filled. If a doctor knows these basic things that each person in each position can control, now there's no need for micromanaging. So there can be, I happen to have a software for our clients where they track this, or you can use something like Practice by Numbers, which doesn't track all of that, but tracks a lot of things. So just like knowing which ones for which position. So like new patients, that should go to the person answering the phone that's getting all the prospective new patients calling in. She should be tracking the new patient number and calls out to schedule and appointments made from those calls. That belongs to the scheduler. So that's pretty much how you do it. And also for hygiene, the hourly average, the number of patients seen, 4,000 codes, production. You don't have to micromanage if the statistics are up. Okay, I don't care if she goes and has a cup of coffee between patients, if she's the hygienist and she's the highest producing hygienist, at least now I know. So that takes away the micromanaging and it makes a more relaxed environment, and the teams really like it.
Yeah, the data don't lie. You know, if you can't measure it, you can't improve on it and can't
That's
fix
right.
it. And as a
Yeah,
dentist, you may have a hunch of what's going on, but until you see the data, you don't really know. So that's great. Sandy, so many great nuggets, but let's wrap up with two final questions. Number one, how do we get a hold of you and find out more about what you're up to? And then number two, what advice do you have to the young dental professionals out there?
okay. Well, you can reach me at classic, like a classic car, practice like you practice the piano.com, classicpractice.com. And my email is Sandy, Sandy, at classicpractice.com. And I'll tell you, I'd also just like to mention to the listeners, I do these seminars called Front Desk Pro. You can find the information on my website. I have be all over the country in 2025. I'm doing different cities. And also For the dentist, the young dentist starting out, get organized. Okay, you've got to get your systems in place. There's about 42 systems in the practice. And you could start with something as simple as, how are we going to handle our new patients? How do I want my phone answered? How are we going to schedule? Broken appointments, financial arrangements, insurance. These are things you start thinking about and learn all you can about each one of these topics. Get an old-fashioned binder. And as you gather data, you see it online, you read articles, you listen to podcasts, start putting your notes and information there. You'll be hearing a lot of different information. Just gather it and then find out like what's going to work best for me. But you want to think of systems. Now, being from the South, I think of systems like recipes for consistency. So if we have the holidays coming up and I know that I make the best beef tenderloin, I have a recipe for that. If I change anything about that recipe, I'm not going to get those predictable results. So your practice is the same way. You need those recipes, which are systems. They need to remain the same consistency for predictable results. Yeah.
That's great. Sandy Pardue, thank you so much. What an amazing episode. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks again for listening to the Stress Free Dentist podcast. And don't hesitate to get in touch with me at info@thestressfreedentist.com. And if you haven't already, please subscribe on your favorite platform and leave us a review. Until the next episode, I'm Dr. Eric Block, the Stress Free Dentist.